Welcome to the Cabinet meeting. I am Councillor Andrew Husband, Leader of Durham County Council and Chair of this meeting. This meeting is being broadcast live through our YouTube channel. Before we commence with today's formal business, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. Please switch off or make silent your mobile phones or all other devices. Keep microphones switched off at all times, unless invited to speak by myself as the Chair. And when invited to speak, please switch on the microphone nearest to you and introduce yourself. So, before we start, please can I politely request we stand for a minute's silence in memory of the late Charlie Kirk. Thank you. Item 1, apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillor Gray from Corfu. Before we move into the substantive part of the agenda, we have received a number of public and member questions for today's meeting. At item 2, I will invite a member of the public to ask their question if they're present, and then invite the relevant Cabinet member to respond. For the public and member questions relating to specific items, I will deal with the public questions first and then move on to the member questions. All of the questions will be taken following the presentation of the item by the relevant officer. Please note that there is no provision for supplementary questions or discussion in respect of the answers. Item 2, public questions. The first public question this morning comes from Mr. Rose. It appears he is unable to attend today's meeting, so a written response to his question will be sent to him. The second question was submitted by Mr. Ainsley. Mr. Ainsley is also unable to attend today's meeting, so a written response to his question will be sent to him. Item 3. Minutes. Can I have a mover and a seconder to the minutes of this meeting? So the meeting held on the 9th of July 2025, the special meeting on 9th of July, and the special meeting held on the 21st of July 2025.
Chair, I move those minutes.
And second?
Second those minutes.
Can we agree the minutes are a correct record? Agreed. I can confirm that the minutes are agreed. Item 4, declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest in relation to any items on the agenda? Thank you. Item 5, medium-term financial plan. Financial forecasts and review of the empty property premium charge, section 13A1C, reduction policy. Can I invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, members. This report sets out the updated MTFP forecasts for the period 2026-27 to 29-30. The report also deals with proposed changes to the Section 13A discretionary council tax discounts policy linked to a previously agreed MTFP saving proposal. In the body of the report, at paragraphs 87 to 160, there is an overview of the government's fair funding review proposals and the assessed impacts it would have on the council's grants position. The detailed response to the Fair Funding Review consultation is attached at Appendix 4, and at Appendix 5 is a copy of the LA7 regional response to the same consultation. As members will see, we have built in some modest assumptions of an additional £30 million of grant as a result of these proposed reforms over the next 3 years. However, it is important to note that the government could change tact, and also that the consultation proposals were subject to some interpretation. The financial forecasts in this report are predicated on no council tax increases being applied across the next 4 years. They show a funding gap or additional savings requirement of around £20 million next year and £71 million across the next 4 years. At paragraphs 161 to 261, there is an explanation line by line of all the figures in the financial forecasts and the assumptions that underpin these. The updated MTFP model is attached at Appendix 2 to the report. The previously agreed savings that cut across this MTFP planning period are attached to Appendix 3, which are largely the same as what was agreed by Council in February, though one saving, proposed staffing reductions in legal, have been removed, one saving has been rephased, the saving linked to the review of the Section 13A policy, and one saving linked to a reduction in the number of wardens has been reduced by 50%. Paragraphs 276 and 281 exemplify what the position would be for our MTFP forecasts if various council tax increases were applied. As members will see, if the council were to apply the maximum council tax increase it could apply, which is what the government expect us to do, then the funding gap or savings requirement will reduce to around £5 million next year and around £10 million over the 4-year period. Decisions on council tax increases and the extent of any new savings that are implemented to balance the budget will need to be taken in February when we set the budget next year. As is stated in the report, it would not be wise, and as a Section 151 officer, I would advise the Council against the temptation to merely use reserves to balance the budget, and the use of the MTFP support reserve should be to smooth in more sustainable solutions and not to delay making those hard decisions to balance the budget. At paragraph 283, there is a lengthy and detailed risk assessment identifying the multitude of risks inherent in these forecasts. As members will see, there are a number of factors that could change and likely worsen our position. The financial position set out in this report is based on some prudent assumptions, but I would highlight that not only could the Fair Funding Review outcomes be different to what is anticipated in this report, inflation and national living wage impacts could be different, but also that the children looked after and home to school transport budget figures could be higher, with work underway in this regard in advance of the next report to Cabinet in November. The budget setting timetable is set out at paragraph 285 of this report. It includes details of the various reports that will come back to Cabinet to be considered by Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board, running up to the budget setting meeting on the 18th of February next year. The consultation arrangements are set out at paragraphs 286 to 290, and as you will see, there are a two-phased approach to consultation. In phase 1, we'll consult on the forecasts in this report and on council tax levels across the next couple of months, and phase 2 will follow the report to Cabinet in November. It is unlikely that we'll get the provisional local government finance settlement until just before Christmas again, though this should be a 3-year settlement this year, with the autumn budget statement now confirmed to be the 26th of November. The workforce considerations in terms of the savings set out at Appendix 3 are set out at paragraphs 291 to 295, and the savings previously agreed would result in a reduction of a further 72 posts across the council. From paragraph 302 onwards, the second part of this report deals with the previously agreed MTFP saving linked to a review of the council's policy on remitting premiums on long-term empty properties and on second homes. As members will see, the report outlines the background to these premiums, when they were introduced and what the Section 13A policy is designed to do, and the circumstances and evidence and requirements to qualify for this relief. The saving is linked to tightening our policy and bringing it in line with the basic statutory requirements and for it to be time limited. The policy changes proposed would bring us in line with the majority of other councils, and paragraph 352 sets out the policy position of other councils in our region. Making the policy change would impact on our tax base, increasing our tax raising capacity. We would need to consult on the changes. The options are set out at paragraphs 353 to 372, and the consultation proposals on this regard are set out at paragraphs 376 to 397. There are a series of recommendations set out at paragraph 65 for Cabinet consideration, and this report will be considered by a special meeting of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board on the 2nd of October, with their views factored into the November Cabinet report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to move the report?
Thank you, Chair. First, Thank you very much to officers for a thorough, honest report. It refreshes the forecasts agreed back in February and sets out the early impact of the government's fair funding review, in inverted commas, so-called. Now, let's be clear for residents who may well be listening, this isn't a budget-setting report. No decision on council tax is going to be taken today. That's going to happen in February. What today's numbers actually do show is the scale of the hole that Westminster leaves us in if councils refuse to actually pass on what I would call Westminster's stealth levy. With no council tax rise, we'll face a £20 million gap next year and around 71 million over the medium term. That's after 15 years of squeezed grants, rise in demand, and councils across the land being pushed to do more with less. And I'm not sure I'll be alone among members in hearing frustration from residents that they're paying more and more and more for less and less and less. But here's the truth that the government dresses up as increased spending power. Every 1% in council tax raises £3 million here in our county. Whitehall expects councils to whack on up to 55% rather a year for the next 3 years. Now, if councils don't, our funding, of course, falls in real terms. And that isn't ending austerity, I think, in any reasonable definition. It's outsourcing it to household direct debits. The biggest cost drivers aren't optional extras. They're national decisions that we must legally fund. Each 1% national pay award that we don't control costs around £3 million. We've already had to find 0.6 million this year because the award landed 0.2% higher than forecast. National insurance increase, of course, being an obvious example of a budgetary pressure. The national living wage uplift flows straight through our adult social care contracts, 10.4 million extra next year alone. Children's placements and home-to-school transport pressures remain acute and, if anything, could worsen, hence why we declared a care emergency. Our planning assumptions are prudent, pay at 3% next year, 2% the year after, and if inflation isn't tamed nationally, of course, which from figures released this morning doesn't look like they are, those figures are going to, of course, need to be revisited. On Section 13A, empty property premium policy, we're going to consult fully on this policy. The aim will be fairness and consistency with guidance and with other councils, not revenue by ambush. Any proposal would have a 12-month lead-in and will protect genuine hardship cases. There's an indicative saving of £550,000. It's a sensible, proportionate and focusing on long-term empties, not people who've fallen, for example, on hard times. So, colleagues, what I would say is we're going to have and face tough choices to balance service reductions against tax rises if Westminster actually refuses to fund the services that they, as Parliament, mandate. But let no one say that reform is itching to actually raise people's bills. Our starting point is really incredibly simple. We said this time and again during the election campaign. We want to wring out waste, we want to protect the front line, and we want to fight for a fair deal from Westminster. If, after all of that, a minimal rise is unavoidable, then residents should take it for what it is. A government-designed social care levy landing on their council tax, not some local vanity project. Since May, we've been getting under the bonnet, we've been reviewing contracts, we've been stripping out costs and binning expensive gimmicks. We've reversed the previous administration's net zero-driven EV procurement alongside actually the forecasts presented to us, making clear that that would be £4 million worse off. We're maximising extended producer responsibility to offset £5 million in waste costs next year, and the triennial pension review trims employer costs by £4 million. We need a multi-year settlement, though. We're not alone in that, we're not unique, but we need a genuinely fair formula that recognises that places like County Durham, with a low council tax base, with the chopping and changing coming later in the year, perhaps too late for us to reasonably get together our autumn budget and be able to prepare for February. That's going to come on the 26th of November. That will mean that settlements are barely there before Christmas. Unless St Nick is going to do our budget setting, that leaves us in quite the predicament. It makes serious financial stewardship harder, not easier. So I'd ask the government to think about that. But with that, Chair, I move the recommendations at paragraph 65.
Thank you. As has been outlined, the updated MTFP forecasts and the scale of the challenge we will face in balancing our budget next year will be extremely difficult to manage. This necessitates a different approach, an approach which focuses on growing the council tax-paying population, increasing job opportunities and expanding the availability of good quality housing, and thereby guarantees more wealth and prosperity, particularly if we are to avoid or limit having to increase council tax in line with government expectations, I would argue demands, which is certainly a key priority for this administration. A freeze is something we are trying to achieve. I have got a simple message though. County Durham is open for business. We do want businesses to also relocate here to create jobs here. The continued significant unavoidable cost pressures we are experiencing, including the impacts of national living wage increases, pay inflation, and in particular the pressures on our statutory social care services as identified, are placing a huge unavoidable strain on our budgets next year. That's exactly why we also, to reiterate, declared a care emergency in July. Next year, we are faced with a forecast net 1.6 million additional cost pressure linked to the statutory requirement to introduce a weekly food waste collection service, with at this stage no sign that this new burden will be funded by the government. In our budget planning, we have, however, sought to offset this and other budget pressures through the use of the Extended Producer Responsibility Grant, which we received in the current year, and we are expect to be able to utilise 5 million of it to help part fund the costs of our waste collection and waste management services. We've also benefited from the improved funding position on the pension fund, a nice surprise, with the Durham Pension Fund expected to be 100% funded now and forecast 4 million reduction in our employer pension costs factored in from next year. The budget estimates do not include any vanity projects or new spending commitments from this administration. The budget forecasts only include unavoidable and absolutely essential spending commitments, and full details of these required spending commitments are set out in the report. Local government funding levels in 26-27 and beyond remain uncertain at this time. The report includes a detailed assessment of the impact of the government's comprehensive spending review and fair funding review proposals published in June, which will result in too little and too late additional funding being received by this council and hardly fixes any foundations and fails to put us on a stable financial footing. We have and will continue to lobby government for more funding and for a fairer share of the funding that is made available, and that the pace of change is rapid. The council response to the government fair funding review consultation proposals is appended to this report, along with a letter to government signed by and sent on behalf of the 7 councils that make up the North East Combined Authority and the Mayor. I do hope they listen. As Councillor Grimes has stated, we are taking a hard look at all of our budgets and spending commitments. We want value for money for local residents for every pound the council spends, and will challenge all capital investments to ensure they are absolutely necessary and underpinned by a strong business case. We do not want to increase the council's borrowing to unsustainable levels. We want to create the circumstances for growth and prosperity, encourage new investment in the county by engaging with a range of stakeholders and focusing on partnership working, including leveraging the benefits of the North East Combined Authority to bring new jobs and encourage expansion of our existing businesses, working in partnership through joint ventures where necessary. We have reviewed all of the savings plans agreed by the previous administration that cut across this budget planning cycle as approved by Council early this year, and made some changes where necessary. Savings and efficiencies will only go so far though. We cannot have a return to the austerity measures that have been so damaging and have had such a disproportionate impact on authorities like ours over the last 14 years. We want to have a different approach to balancing the budget and a grown-up conversation and transparency in the decisions we make in this regard. We will need to be prudent in our capital investment decisions and place greater scrutiny on this going forward. These MTFP forecasts include 8.2 million of required budget growth to accommodate the decisions reached by the previous administration, the equivalent of 2.75% increase in council tax to fund those investment decisions alone, which will see our external borrowing increase from 435 million at 31st of March 2025 to circa 967 million need to borrow by 31st of March 2028, a more than doubling of our external debt, with the majority of this contractually committed. It is clear to me that without further investment and a different approach to help the council and the wider sector, then cuts will inevitably need to be made going forward. As we stand, assuming we do not increase the council tax over the next 4 years, we face, again to reiterate, a 20 million challenge to balance our budget next year, a further 17 million challenge the year after that, with a £71 million challenge in total forecast across the next 4 years. And this is assuming the position does not deteriorate in terms of unavoidable spending pressures over and above those set out already in terms of statutory home to school transport and children looked after placement costs. We will work hard to come up with innovative solutions to these problems where we can. We simply must break the status quo. The report exemplifies the impact on our budget position from increasing the council tax at varying levels up to the government preferred and expected demanded level of 5% per annum, something we must try to avoid if possible. Fundamentally, our inherent low tax raising capacity as a council, alongside the challenges of providing services in a county of our size and with our deprivation challenges placed upon us in an impossible position when government funding doesn't close the gap. Given the scale of the financial challenge we face, it is important that we have a well-managed medium-term financial plan process to help us address these challenges, but it's also important that we think outside of the box and we try to avoid these perennial series of cuts to services every year whilst hiking up the council tax at the same time. Something must and will have to change. The report sets out a clear path for setting a balanced budget in February next year, including details of the planned consultation of the budget. We want to transform the council to make it more efficient and effective, and we will do that. The Cabinet will continue to work with officers to develop a range of new savings plans, opportunities to maximise growth, income in our tax base that will be published in November and consulted on thereafter. These will build on the circa 5.7 million of savings that were agreed in February, that cut across the MTFP planning period, details of which are appended to the report. We must not succumb to the temptation to avoid difficult decisions and just seek to use reserves to push away the problems we face. This is not a sustainable budget strategy to adopt and not something this administration will encourage. The proposed changes to the S13A policy and the implications of this link to a saving previously agreed by Council are set out in detail in the report, alongside the planned consultation on these proposals. The outcome of the consultation will need to be carefully reflected on later in the year when decisions on any policy changes are taken. It is only right that this given serious consideration and that residents impacted are given 12 months notice of these potential changes, which will only come into effect from 27-28. With that, I am happy to second the report and the recommendations set out at paragraph 65. Are there any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Thank you. Does Cabinet agree the recommendations? Thank you. Moving on, item 6, Q1 25 Performance Management Report. 25-26 Performance Management Report. Can I trust the typists? Can I invite Stephen Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everybody. I'm Steve Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs. Our Q1 Performance Report provides an update on the progress based on the priorities and objectives set by the Cabinet in July. We're moving at pace, and this interim framework provides initial clarity so that everyone in the organisation, partners and communities are clear on the new approach. These ambitions have been subject to extensive consultation and analysis, and we presented to Cabinet and full Council in October 2025. As the new administration's policy direction becomes clearer, our framework will be updated to reflect operational performance and monitor progress against SMART targets and outcome measures. In line with good practice, our emerging performance framework continues to be set in the context of best value principles and our medium-term financial planning and budget setting arrangements. The scope of this interim report is intended to meet a range of monitoring requirements from various audiences. This includes members, senior managers, employees, regulatory bodies and the public. In doing so, this report provides an ongoing mechanism for scrutinising the performance of our services and supporting transparency. As usual, progress is described through a range of key performance indicators contextualised with benchmarking data where it's available and information from service teams. This includes a range of service level dashboards and supporting narrative, providing a clear golden thread between the priorities of this council and the performance of operational services. Overall performance is strong across most areas. For example, performance exceeds targets for supporting businesses and increasing investment in jobs created or safeguarded. Processing times and housing benefit and council tax reduction requests have improved further despite increased demand. As members will appreciate, this is strong performance and a notable achievement in the face of financial inflationary demand pressures over the last few years. And where there are areas of performance falling below our expectations, we are aware of them and have improvement plans in place. And Chair, we've heard in the previous report some of the challenges around demand-driven budget pressures, and that's reflected in this performance report. And a couple of examples would be statutory demand for children's social care remains high, with an average of 500 children referred each month in Q1. Despite this, improved practices across statutory children's social care has led to a consistently low re-referral rate. Despite higher demand, performance remains strong in these areas. The number of children in care remains reasonably high at around 1,200, following a period of sustained increase throughout 2024, although the actions of the service have seen this stabilise at around that number. The main performance report is attached to Appendix 2, and the executive summary pulls out some of the key highlights. Greater detail is contained within each chapter. The performance data presented here will be reported to the thematic overview and scrutiny committees in the coming weeks, where there will be a chance for more in-depth analysis of the Council's performance and for them to feed back. Cabinet are asked to note the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We have 2 questions on this item. Can I firstly ask Councillor Hopgood to ask her question, please?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Paragraphs 18 and 19 of this report states, contrary to claims made by your party in the election campaign that County Durham roads were amongst the worst in the North East, that the condition of County Durham roads has continued to improve. Indeed, the report states that our roads are better than the average road, both nationally and regionally. Does the leader agree with me that this was the result of extra investment made by the previous administration, and can he confirm that this administration will continue to make similar improvements? Thank you.
Thank you. The highway network is the Council's largest and most valuable tangible asset, valued at 10 billion, and is used daily by nearly all County Durham residents and businesses, together with many visitors. It is fundamental to economic and social activity in County Durham. In total, there are 3,843 kilometres of adopted carriageway across the county, from strategic A-class roads to unclassified rural links. Durham County Council inspects and maintains all roads and highways using a risk-based approach, taking into consideration guidance offered in the National Code of Practice for Well-Managed Highway Infrastructure. This approach is supplemented by the Council's own code in terms of highway safety inspection, manual and highway maintenance plan. The condition of the Council's roads are independently surveyed, and the data is used to calculate performance indicators, figures, and recent trends show that in terms of A, B, and C class roads, the percentages of roads where maintenance should be considered has remained roughly the same since 2020 at around 3%, with marginal improvements on A and B class roads and a marginal deterioration on C class roads. So the assumptions in your question about well-spent extra investment are akin to Rachel Reeves declaring we have a booming economy. Improvements are evident, though, on unclassified roads, and we, Reform, as an administration, will be looking at further improving these figures and our performance despite the ongoing challenging funding position. We will continue to challenge previous ways of working and will investigate the use of new technologies and processes to identify more efficient methods of delivery. We will look at the trialling of new equipment, machinery and technology in advance of making any longer-term investment decisions. We will work with our partners to maximise funding opportunities for the county and ensure we obtain as much external funding as possible. We will ensure that we continue to make investment decisions in County Durham that make the greatest difference to the lives of residents of County Durham, and our ongoing capital programme will reflect that approach. And can I now ask Councillor Scott to ask her question, please?
Thank you, Councillor. Given that Councillor Fox's portfolio has been scrapped, can the relevant portfolio holder please confirm that with active borrower numbers improving across the library network and that our libraries are indeed exceeding targets, that this council will continue to directly provide this valuable physical service to our communities?
Thank you. When was it scrapped? Anyway, can I invite Councillor Allison, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Tourism, High Streets, to respond?
Thank you, Chair. On the premise of the question, the portfolio is clearly not scrapped, and I stand before you today as the portfolio holder. Reports of its demise have been greatly exaggerated. Don't believe what you read. On libraries, yes, we will continue to directly operate a comprehensive physical library service across County Durham. It's a statutory duty under the 1964 Act, and our network is performing. Active borrower numbers are rising, and we're exceeding our internal targets. Digital adds reach. It does not replace staffed branches. There's no agenda to outsource, voluntarise by stealth or hollow out provision. We will keep improving buildings, stock and events, publish the latest KPIs for transparency and match opening hours to local demand. Bottom line, public, physical, open. That's our commitment to Durham's libraries. Thank you, Chair.
That concludes the questions on this item. Are there any Cabinet members wishing to speak? Can I ask Cabinet to note the report? Thank you. Item 7, 2025-26, Q1 forecast outturn for the revenue budget, capital budgets, collection fund and treasury management. Can I invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning again, members. This report sets out our revenue and capital forecasts, including the forecast position to the 31st of March 26 for all earmarked reserves, and factoring in the review of the reserves and the review of the capital programme that has been undertaken post the local elections in May. Some of the issues highlighted in this report have influenced the MTFP 16 forecast we considered earlier, particularly the extended producer responsibility grant income, the savings on capital financing and the impact of the pay award for the current year being higher than the budget provision. As members will see, we are forecasting a circa £8 million underspend this year based on the position to the 30th of June, which will see the general reserve increase to 39.2 million and represent 6.3% of the Council's 25-26 net budget requirement. The net underspend is largely down to the EPR income underspend, savings on the capital financing costs due to planned and managed delays in borrowing, and one-off income linked to a court case we won relating to truck cartels. In Q1, a £4 million budget environment from the Adult and Health Services Commissioning budget to the Children and Young People Services Children Looked After Commissioning budget was actioned. In terms of the CYPS forecasts, where there is a circa £1.8 million overspend forecast, the home to school transport figures included in this report are based on the budget, the outturn being in line with the budget at this stage. There is some further work required based on the September admissions and on our children looked after placement budgets, where in recent weeks there have been signs of further cost pressures manifesting in this budget. Both of these issues will need to inform updated forecasts for Q2 and may well impact on the budget and MTFP forecast we considered earlier, as Councillor Grimes outlined. All other services, with the exception of regeneration, economy and growth, where there is a £194,000 overspend, are forecast to underspend this year. The service group and commentary and the reasons for any under and overspending in the budgets are set out at paragraphs 43 to 81 of the report, and as members will see, the under and overspends are a combination of one-off issues and managed positions in advance of MTFP savings requirements in future years. In overall terms, the forecast position for our earmarked reserves shows that these will reduce by £11.3 million in year. Appendix 4 provides full details of the opening and closing position for all earmarked reserves. And as members will see, during the quarter, a review reserves was undertaken with a view to reallocating and reprioritising reserves to shore up the corporate reserves position. This report sets out details of the transfers that have been actioned, and as members will see, £25.2 million of reserves have been transferred, and details of the review and the transfers made are set out at paragraphs 93 to 97, with Appendix 4 including a column so that the movements can be tracked. There is a table at paragraph 100 that summarises the position in terms of the £157.4 million of earmarked reserves that are forecast to be held at the end of this financial year. Members will see that £18.6 million of this is grant and sums held on behalf of third parties, and £69.3 million is corporate reserves, including the MTFP support reserve, forecast to be £34.6 million at the end of this year, and the RVR reserve, which is forecast to be £10.2 million, and both of which will assist in our budget planning for the next 4 years. At paragraphs 106 to 127, there is an update on the position for the various blocks of the dedicated schools grant. In terms of our maintained schools, the updated position indicates an £8.1 million drawdown on schools retained reserves this year, around £354,000 more than what was forecast when the budgets were agreed by the schools governing bodies. There is an update on the 5 schools that were given a licence deficit this year at paragraphs 112 and 113, and all 5 are on track to remain within their licence deficit position at this stage. The high needs SEND position indicates a £14.5 million in-year overspend this year, increasing the high needs SEND cumulative deficit to £37.5 million by this year end. It is important to note that this figure could well change and potentially worsen once the September intake and the updated HCP assessment position is taken into account, which will also impact on the home to school transport position. The high needs cumulative deficit position is being cash flowed by the council taxpayer and impacting on our general fund position. The estimated impact is around £1.7 million in terms of lost interest this year alone. Paragraphs 128 to 144 deal with the capital programme and associated financing arrangements. Paragraph 133 sets out the 25-26 position, factoring in the amendments arising from reprofiling, new grants and new funding. The capital programme review undertaken by the Cabinet post the local elections in May, and the outcomes of this and the proposed changes to the capital programme previously agreed are summarised at paragraphs 138 and 139. One of the recommendations of this report is to agree the amendments to the capital programme. In total, £21.3 million of capital schemes have been removed as part of this review and will reduce our reborrowing requirement, but £9.2 million of this was classed as self-financing, so the MTFP revenue impact would be a £720,000 saving, which will need to factor into the November MTFP update report should members agree the changes today. Paragraphs 146 to 159, as is usually the case, there is some updates against the Treasury Management and Prudential Code indicators agreed by Council, and reporting progress against these to Cabinet on a quarterly basis is considered to be best practice. The Council tax and business rates collection fund positions and the forecasts are covered at paragraphs 160 to 178 and summarised at paragraph 179 in the report in terms of the Council's share of these collection funds. Both collection funds are forecast to be in surplus to the year end, with the Council's share of the projected council tax surplus being £460,000 and our share of the business rate surplus position being £1.582 million. Finally, Chair, at paragraphs 180 to 182, there is an update on the delivery of savings that were factored into the 25-26 base budget, with around 95% of these savings having been delivered to date. There is a table at paragraph 182 which details the savings have not yet been delivered, totaling £974,000, some of which are just timing issues, but some of which are forecast to produce overspends this year. The undelivered savings relate to principally to the regeneration, economy and growth service and to the neighbourhoods and environment service in the main, and those services are working on mitigating actions. The recommendations, Chair, are set out at paragraph 30. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. We have a number of questions from members on this item. Can I ask Councillor Bell to ask his question, please?
Thanks, Chair. My question relates to item 7 on the Cabinet Papers, paragraph 19. Please can the Deputy Leader advise what the 9.174 million of cancelled self-financing borrowing refers to? And given that it was self-financing, will the Council lose any predicted future revenue, and if so, how much? Can he also confirm that he will use the true savings figure to the Council of £0.72 million per annum in his public statements, and not the 21.181 million of schemes cancelled, of which only 12 million were not self-financing anyway? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to respond to the question?
Thanks, Chair. I would urge the Councillor not to ring the bell here, because I think you've actually answered your own question in the figures that you quote. In paragraph 19 of the executive summary, and actually in paragraph 140, the report makes clear that 21.281 million, not 21.181 million, as you quoted there, has actually been removed from the capital programme, reducing the future borrowing need. Now, it's correct to say that 9.174 million of that future borrowing need was actually previously classed as self-financing. Now, in these cases, to be funded from reductions in energy costs in future years with long payback periods. It's not correct to say that these schemes would save us millions, as some members have claimed. The reduction in energy costs, for example, would have been offset by the debt charges on the loans that would have been needed to be taken out to fund the capital investments with payback periods ranging from 8 to 18 years. And that assumes that there were no major maintenance issues and that these PV units operated at maximum efficiency. We all have our off days, including solar panels. There was no net saving to the Council whilst these loans were being paid, and once repaid, there would have been a need to replace the installations and incur more costs and take out more loans to fund them. As a fiscal conservative, I assume Councillor Bell wouldn't suggest we do such a thing. We've not claimed to have saved 21.281 million in revenue costs from the review of the capital programme, and the report rightly identifies that the annual revenue cost savings from the 12.107 million of corporately funded borrowing is around £720,000, which will factor into our budget planning in future reports should the Cabinet endorse the proposals as set out in the report under item 7.
Thank you, Darren. The next two questions from Councillor Mark Wilkes and Councillor Catherine Rooney relate to the same matter, so I'll invite both councillors to put their question before asking members to respond. Councillor Wilkes, can you ask your question first, please?
Thank you, Chair, and good morning, everyone. The report states that Cabinet has stopped the project to invest in solar panels on council buildings, which would provide significant taxpayer savings over the life of the project, and indeed continue to make savings well beyond that period, with panels able to contribute to generate at least 80% capacity for many years more. Would the relevant Cabinet member pause this decision, refer it to scrutiny for a transparent discussion on this costly reversal, and take the opportunity right now to explain how counselling this project financially benefits the Council? Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Rooney, can you ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair. Could the relevant portfolio holder confirm if Cabinet knows the likely level of compensation the Council will have to pay for pulling out of the solar on council building projects?
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to respond to the two for the price of one questions, please?
Thank you, Chair. Now, thank you very much for both of those questions. I'll take Councillor Wilkes's first. The proposed solar panel schemes would extend the Council's borrowing even further. Now, while the schemes look like they might save the council a bit of cash, the approved business case showed that we wouldn't have seen any benefit from these savings for at least 8 years, and in some cases up to 17 years. The much quoted £77,000 a year in savings was almost entirely swallowed up by £73,500 in annual debt repayments. And that's before you even add in inspection and, of course, maintenance costs. In reality, this was a Lib Dem ladle debt pile. No savings for the first 8 years, only more liabilities loaded on to our residents as taxpayers. And all of this, of course, without the certainty that the buildings would even remain in council hands for the 17-year repayment period. As an administration, we want to reduce the council's debt and put the authority in a better financial position. We don't see any need to pause that decision. As members know, we passed a democratic verdict in undeclaring climate alarmism and prioritising our council's care emergency, identified time and again by Paul Darby. We're choosing wheelchairs over windmills. We're choosing care over carbon, and SEND children over solar. So thank you very much for that, Councillor Wilkes. Now, Councillor Rooney, negotiations with the contractor are ongoing in terms of reaching a settlement for the preparatory work actually undertaken so far, and that's amounted to surveys and related preliminary activity only. It would be inappropriate, of course, to speculate while those negotiations are underway, but it is worth stressing that the opposition's claim of 13 million in savings from past green schemes, which I saw when I was perusing the BBC this weekend, are a case of, I would say, yellow smoke and mirrors. It's based on what the council might have paid if energy consumption had stayed at 2008 levels using today's inflated prices. It includes things like mothballing County Hall, this chamber, which I don't know if the chair's noticed, but you can tell we're skinned because it's absolutely freezing. And the lights aren't working. Yeah, the lights aren't working either. Energy costs too high. And actually looking into things like home working, which have of course changed since then. And it ignores the borrowing costs behind those schemes. It's not 13 million in the bank, it's an accountant trick. The truth is that these projects are less about sound finances and more about eco-virtue signalling at very real cost to our brilliant taxpayers. This administration was elected on a very clear mandate to bring honesty to the books, and will bring back projects that actually deliver bankable savings for County Durham, not ones built on headline numbers and long-term debt to virtue signal in the pages of the Northern Echo. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The final question on this item is from Councillor Heaviside. Can I ask Councillor Heaviside to ask his question, please?
Thank you, Chair. I refer to the capital programme reductions tucked away on page 338. Given that the capital programme for Chesley Street and Seaham combined have already had their budgets reduced from 5 million to 2 million, and I find that quite shocking, so suggest that any additional repairs and maintenance comes from the capitalised repairs and maintenance budget tells me that you ultimately intend closing the leisure centres, because that budget is already overcommitted. The capitalised repairs and maintenance budget has just over 15 million for the next 2 years and is already committed to spending 17.2 million. So my question is, from page 388, paragraph 139B, subparagraph 4, unprogrammed leisure transformation budget, why has the potential investment for future works been reduced from 5 million to 2 million for both Chesley Street and Seaham leisure centres combined, given that the capitalised repairs and maintenance budget is already limited? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Quinn, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Resources, Investment, Assets? Actually, that's changed now, isn't it, Joe? Councillor Quinn. Please respond to the question.
Thank you, Chair. Oh, it's a bit loud. I'll do my best to answer Councillor Heaviside's question, although the question I got was slightly different to the one that's been asked today. Can I thank Councillor Heaviside for his question? We have inherited a position where capital expenditure commitments based on decisions of the previous administration have committed the council to increasing its borrowing from around 435 million at the 31st of March 2025 to circa 967 million. need to borrow by 31st of March 2028, an eye-watering increase. With much of this contractually committed now, so difficult choices have had to be made. I appreciate that some of the borrowing was needed to be self-financing, and that debt charges for our current under-borrowed position and the future commitments for borrowing are factored into our MTFP planning. But these capital financing costs are placing a strain on our revenue budget and making it difficult to balance the books. Based on the capital programme commitments agreed by the previous administration, the capital financing costs budget was expected to be around 58.8 million by 28-29. with the capital financing budget representing 9.4% of the Council's current net revenue budget at the time, at a fixed cost impacting on future generations. It is true that capitalised repairs and maintenance budget is limited, but we will prioritise allocations to it to augment the 2 million of the budget that has been retained and ensure that any urgent repairs that are needed to these facilities to keep them open. I would also add that we are having high-level discussions about some significant potential investment and redevelopment of the Riverside sports facilities, which will hopefully see multi-million investment and transformation of these facilities in the future, with local community use protected.
Thank you. That concludes the questions on this item. Can I now invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to move the report?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks again to officers and budget managers for a tight grip in an incredibly choppy year. The headline is that we're forecasting a net £8 million underspend, largely from managed underspends across services and corporate budgets, helped by a delay in borrowing. This is about sensible housekeeping, not potluck. Pressures remain very real, though. Children's and young people's forecasts at £1.8 million overspend, regeneration, economy and growth, 194,000, but we've rebalanced £4 million between adult health and children's commissioning budget to reflect need, and we continue to challenge costs line by line. On reserves, our general reserve is forecast 39.2 million at year end, 6.3% of net budget requirement, and within policy. Earmarked reserves are forecast to reduce by 11.3 million this year to 157.4 million, of which 18.6 million is passed through grants or held for others. For a £1.7 billion gross spend organisation, 7 largest unitary that members will well be aware of, those levels are deemed proportionate. They're not a piggy bank though, right? They are our shock absorbers. And now the scandal that Westminster won't own, which I'm sure the members across different political parties of all hues will actually recognise, the high needs dedicated schools grant forecast of an overspend of 14.5 billion this year, with a cumulative retained deficit of 37.5 million by year end, all because government have designed a system that it refuses to actually fund properly, just hopes it can sweep it under the carpet. Our local taxpayers are losing £1.7 million in interest this year alone just to cash flow the deficit. That's money that's not going into services here because Whitehall won't get a grip of a problem, I should say, of something that it itself has created. So we await with bated breath November's autumn budget, again, of course, to find out if they'll stop kicking the can. Honestly, Gaza doesn't have a look in at this juncture. Our savings delivery is on track. By 30th of June, we're on course to deliver 95% of the £18 million target. £974,000 of that looks at risk and is being mitigated. On capital, since May, we've reviewed the lot. We're deleting £21.3 million of lower priority schemes not yet contractually committed, reducing the revenue pressure by £720,000 and avoiding unnecessary debt. We'll keep challenging the business case for every pound of borrowing. Debt needs to be a tool and not a trophy. On schools, maintained schools are planned to draw £7.7 million from our balances, Q1 suggests that 8.1 million of that leaves 19.4 million sector-wide amid restructures. In sum, we're holding the line in year, we're tackling pressures early on, and we're refusing to pretend that national cost drivers are local choices. And with that, Chair, I move the recommendations at paragraph 30.
Thank you. Can I also add my thanks to those of Councillor Grimes and to Paul and his team for this detailed report, and to all budget managers across the Council for their continued effective management of the budgets. Managing the budget in an organisation of this scale and complexity of the Council and the environment in which we work, particularly when there are significant demand and volatility on our cost base, is very challenging. Unavoidable unavoidable pay and price inflation, matters wholly outside of our control. Together, the huge cost increases in statutory social care and home-to-school transport continue to place huge strain on the Council's finances. But we do have plans afoot. That all said, it is pleasing to see that we are forecasting a circa 8 million underspend to the year end, with any enduring unavoidable cost pressures and opportunities for budget savings and reductions factored into the 2026-27 budget planning and MTFP forecasts we have just considered. It is also pleasing to see that nearly 95% of the 18 million of budget savings that were factored into the 2025-26 budget have been delivered and are on track to be delivered at 30th of June. The review of reserves detailed in this report has ensured that we have shored up the corporate reserves position, providing us with a stronger position to manage the challenges ahead. At 6.3% of our net budget requirement, the General Reserve is forecast to be in a much healthier position than what we inherited from the previous administration, and bang in the middle of the target of maintaining this at between 5 and 7.5% of the net budget requirement, which is what is set out in our reserves policy. The initial review of the capital programme has identified 21.3 million of budget savings from scrapping, that's the only thing we've scrapped today, scrapping projects that do not align to this administration's priorities, reducing our borrowing need and providing the opportunity to factor in £720,000 of savings into the MTFP forecast going forward. Many of the capital schemes we inherited were contractually committed or in the ground, and therefore we couldn't do anything about them. We will, however, continue to challenge all capital investments going forward and ensure these are absolutely necessary and underpinned by strong business cases in order to seek to limit external borrowing as much as possible. With that, I am happy to second the recommendations as set out in the report at paragraph 30, as outlined in the report, including the amendments to the capital programme. Thank you. Are there any Cabinet members wishing to speak? And does the Cabinet agree the recommendations? Thank you. Moving on to item 8, Health and Wellbeing Board Annual Report 2024-25. Can I invite Amanda Healy, Director of Public Health, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. This report is to set out the update on the Health and Wellbeing Board Annual Report for 24-25. During that period, Councillor Chris Hood was the Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is now chaired by Councillor Brown. It sets out the statutory responsibilities of the board, including the writing of a joint local health and wellbeing strategy, underpinned by local needs and assets. And also sets out the vision for the Health and Wellbeing Board, which is for County Durham to be a healthy place where people live well for longer, so length of life but quality of life too. And also outlines the fact that the Health and Wellbeing Board is made up of a range of partners, so our NHS colleagues, Office of Police and Crime Commissioner, Fire and Rescue, Durham University, to name a few, and also Health Watch, who have that kind of voice of the person. The main report sets out some of the activities over the year where we've had development sessions focused on our young people with special educational needs and disabilities, and also setting out some clear priorities and measures to achieve the ambitions of the joint local health and wellbeing strategy. And it also goes into detail into two of our kind of key areas which don't get a lot of time at the Health and Wellbeing Board over the course of the year. That includes sexual health, and over the last year between April 24 to March 2025, we carried out recommissioning of the sexual health services, which the local authority is responsible. We also carried out some multi-agency delivery of relationship and sexual health education in our alternative education settings, and also saw greater uptake of some of our condom distribution schemes and extension of some of our walk-in clinics in the east and the south of the county, where the uptake is most needed. So we've seen some good developments in relation to our sexual health services, and they're outlined in the main report. Another key area has been the implementation of the oral health promotion strategy. And over that year, what we saw was an extension of the supervised toothbrushing scheme, which is offered through some of our nurseries and settings for 2 to 5 year olds. And that's been expanded from the top 20% of our most deprived areas to the top 30%. And at that point, we were also waiting to see if there was additional funding going to be provided for the scheme to extend it further. And that has now been provided. But that includes oral health packs, toothbrushes, toothpaste, information, but also education in those settings through our oral health promotion team that's provided through our local trust. There continue to be challenges in relation to oral health, and some of the next steps are set out in the report, including that further extension of toothbrushing and government decisions in relation to water fluoridation. The rest of the report sets out the 4 priorities for the Health and Wellbeing Board, which include reducing smoking, supporting people to be a healthy weight, mental health and resilience, and reducing alcohol. And for each of those, it outlines the ambition, the changes that we want to see, the progress that has been made, case studies which try to bring the work to life and show what has happened over the last year. So, for example, we know that for alcohol, for example, you'll see the case study in the report for an ex-sports player who had lost her job and had lost her way, and by engaging in treatment in our Women's Recovery Academy, has now been able to set up her own business and got back into, doing that entrepreneurial work for herself. You'll also see, in relation to mental health and suicide, that we've launched a men's suicide network, a big arts project, and also a children's arts and wellbeing cafe. And then finally, in relation to tobacco, our local work with Fresh at a regional level, and some of our cancer survivors, obviously Cathy Hunt in her resident role being one of those who is part of both local and national campaigns. So the report outlines all of those range of activities and sets out the challenges going forward. And Chair, the recommendations to note the report and endorse the report are set out in paragraph 9. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda. Can I invite Councillor Brown, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Adult and Health Services, to move the report?
Thank you, Chair. I would like to thank Amanda and the team for the detailed report. Always very good. Now, as Portfolio Holder for Adult and Health Services and also Chair of the Health and Wellbeing Board, it falls on me to present the 24-25 Health and Wellbeing Board report. We are now in a position to look back at what has been achieved, but more importantly, to focus on making improvements within our 4 priority areas. Back in May 2023, the Health and Wellbeing Board agreed the Joint Health and Wellbeing Strategy. It decided to concentrate on a few key areas that would have the most impact based on what the residents have told us. Now is the time for us to track our progress in each of these priority areas. We want to know if they are making a real difference. To make that easier, we have turned our data projections into clear local goals that we can measure and work towards. Cutting smoking to 5% of adults by 2030. This means 28,000 smokers in County Durham. Reducing adult obesity to fewer than 1 in 5 by 2034. That's 61,000 fewer people living with obesity in County Durham. Lowering anxiety levels. We want fewer than 10% of people to report high anxiety by 2034. That's 53,000 fewer people living with that constant worry. Reducing alcohol-specific deaths by 20% by 2034. We are aiming for 23 fewer deaths each year. Now, this is a big ask, as the number of alcohol-specific deaths is forecast to increase. So by meeting this target, it is in fact 42 fewer deaths than expected. We are also reviewing how we approach mental health and well-being. The idea is to remove any duplication or unnecessary red tape in the system. Streamlining our processes means faster, smarter decisions and making sure we're always listening to the real experiences of people and communities. That way, people get the right support when they need it. And I'm also keen to see how this approach can be applied to other areas across the system, creating a more unified and effective way of working. After all, teamwork makes the dream work. The board continues to meet its statutory duties, and we're confident in our health protection arrangements and remain committed to delivering integrated health and social care. Links across the wider County Durham partnerships are growing stronger, helping us tackle the wider factors that affect health, like housing, poverty, education, the economy and the environment. Together we are working to make County Durham a place where people live well and live longer. I move the recommendation in the report in paragraph 9. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I invite Councillor Hunt, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People Services, to second the report?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, everybody. As Portfolio Holder for Children and Young People, I am pleased to see the lots of examples of the work with children and young people, equipping them with the tools to improve their own physical and mental health now and maintain that into adulthood. The vision of the Health and Wellbeing Board is that County Durham is a healthy place where people live well and longer. The best foundation for this is to enable our young people to have the best start in life, surrounded by positive role models and healthy communities. I am proud to be involved in the Smoking Survivors campaign, developed by Fresh and rolled out nationally, sharing my story about the impact smoking has had on mine and my family's lives. The Health and Wellbeing Board continues to champion local programmes, commissioned regional campaigns and actively support national changes to give our children a smoke-free childhood, something I am personally passionate about. Local authorities have a responsibility under the Health and Social Act to commission high quality and accessible sexual health services for the local population. Achievements include the completion of a health equality audit to inform sexual health delivery, an increase in the update of HPV vaccines through schools and community services, and multi-agency delivery of relationships and sex and health education to alternative education providers. This will support our communities to have access to high quality, inclusive and confidential sexual health support, which gives them the knowledge, self-assurance and ability to make informed choices. I second the recommendations in this report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Are there any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Does Cabinet agree their recommendations? Thank you. Item 9, Corporate Procurement End of Year Performance and Social Value Report 2024-25. Can I invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report covers our procurement activity in 24-25, i.e. last financial year. It includes an overview of the Council spending, comparison with other councils in our region, and an update on our work to deliver social value outcomes. The report identifies the legislative and constitutional requirements which govern our procurement activity, with the legislative framework now being determined by the Procurement Act 2023, which has replaced the Public Contract Regulations 2015. Our procurement activity is overseen by a central procurement team who operate on a category management basis. The report identifies that there were 1,268 separate procurement exercises undertaken last year, with £958 million of procurement spend incurred. This includes capital and revenue expenditure, but excludes our maintained school spending. The table of paragraph 27 breaks this down by supplier and by area, in county, in region, and with SME sector, etc. And there is a table of paragraph 29 which breaks down those 1,268 procurement exercises by procurement route, and paragraph 41 provides a further breakdown of spend by category. The procurement team, working closely with Business Durham, actively promote and try to improve access to local suppliers within the county. And in Durham, there is a higher percentage of spend with the small and medium enterprises and within the county and within our region than neighbouring authorities. All North East authorities except Durham are below the government benchmark for in-authority spending. Social value is now embedded in the Procurement Act 2023, and this council has been sector leading and won loads of awards for our work in this area. Social value impacts, which include things like local supply chains, employment and apprentice opportunities, are part of the decision-making criteria, with up to 10% of the assessment based on these aspects. Some examples of good outcomes delivered through this approach are outlined in the report at paragraphs 86 and covering 12 projects. And at paragraph 87, there is some details of other procurement activity that have delivered social value outcomes also. The report concludes by giving an update on the County Durham Pound project, where we are promoting social value and working with our partners to broaden understanding and engagement on social value in procurement activity. This report is for information only. It shines a light on our sector-leading work in this area and gives Cabinet an overview and assurance over our procurement activity. The recommendations are set out at paragraph 12. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Can I invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to speak on the report?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'm going to have to ask the Corporate Finance Director to buy us all some thermals for the next Cabinet meeting. I would like to place on record my thanks to all of the officers involved in our procurement activity and in delivering social value outcomes, particularly Sarah Armstrong and Richard Carroll, for their leadership and support to this agenda. Our work on social value is sector leading. Good procurement not only ensures that we adhere to relevant statutory requirements and our contract procedure rules, but also ensures we deliver good outcomes for local residents. A change in the legislation earlier this year has actually placed a greater emphasis on our adherence to financial rules and regulations, ensuring transparency and accountability in how we spend money, and that funds are spent efficiently, transparently and fairly. This report demonstrates how, where and with whom we spend taxpayers' money. That is transparent, accountable and value-driven. As has been noted, our external spending has increased by 130 million to 958 million, I wish it was 95 million, last year. Our key spend areas continue to be social care and our construction and infrastructure programme, where we continue to work with local-based providers and supply chains to create those local employment opportunities. It's important that we continue to consider how we spend our money within the legislative framework which actually governs us. This administration is laser-focused on delivering value for money and ensuring our contractual arrangements are robust and fit for purpose. We're keen to ensure that there is appropriate political oversight of the Council's contracting arrangements going forward. It's pleasing to see that such a high proportion of our spending being with County Durham-based SME businesses, ensuring that the Durham Pound is reinvested in local businesses and local employment within our county for the benefit of County Durham residents and our economy. We must always strive to ensure any local business can access the opportunities to tender for and be involved in the supply chain from the expenditure that we incur. As Cabinet members will see, our work on social value continues to go from strength to strength, and as the Durham Pound Partnership grows, so does the impact it's having in terms of the supply chain. in training and in employment opportunities across the county. Embedding consideration of these matters in contracts and procurement activity is increasingly becoming business as usual, and it's important that we continue to support and grow this local ecosystem. The report sets out a number of examples where social value outcomes have been delivered as a direct consequence of our procurement activity and processes. That didn't just happen, it required effort and a good deal of creative thinking and approach, but work which I'm sure is very satisfying for all of those involved. And with that, Chair, I move that Cabinet note this report.
Thank you. Are there any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? Can I ask Cabinet to note the report? Agreed. Moving on to item 10, Corporate Peer Challenge Preparedness Report. Can I invite Steve Evans, Head of Corporate Affairs, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. I've brought a report that summarises our preparation for the LGA Corporate Peer Challenge that's due to commence on the 7th of October. The Corporate Peer Challenge is described by the Local Government Association as a robust, strategic and credible challenge to support councils, bringing together political and managerial leadership through the use of member and officer peers. This is a part of the national government's expectations of sector-led improvement, which is enshrined in best value standards. It is also one of the factors taken into account in the Ministry of Housing, Community and Local Government's oversight of local government performance. As such, a successful peer challenge is of paramount importance to the organisation. The peer challenge culminates in a report summarising the strengths of the council, areas for improvement and key recommendations, which the council must publish alongside an improvement plan. The council then receives a follow-up visit from peers around 12 months after the original peer challenge, where they assess progress against that improvement plan. Our paper outlines progress made against our own internal self-assessment and improvement plan, and therefore our current compliance with standards used during the peer challenge. The paper also outlines the position statement, which is structured around the Corporate Peer Challenge's 5 core themes and is used to help peers prepare for the review. You will note from the report the self-assessment action plan that we've gone from being fully compliant in 66% of the 220 statements used to assess us in September last year to 93% now, with only 15 statements being judged as partially compliant. It's unlikely that any council is fully compliant with all of the standards. In areas of partial compliance, we also demonstrate progress and improvement plans. As such, we should feel confident and ready for the peer challenge. The self-assessment is reflected in the position statement, which we sent to peers as part of their pre-arrival information. This will help them to understand the context in which we operate within County Durham, as well as our self-assessed strengths and challenges. I myself have been a peer recently and can attest to the fact that the Corporate Peer Challenge itself should be welcomed as an opportunity to draw on the knowledge of experience of peers and to enable us to gauge what more could or should be done by the authority on its journey of continuous improvement. The recommendations are set out in the report. These are for Cabinet to note the progress made in implementing the actions and in compliance against the 220 best value and corporate peer challenge statements attached to Appendix 3 and to approve the position statement attached to Appendix 2. Thank you.
Can I thank Steve and his team for the report, and more importantly thank all those officers who have been involved in not only preparing the self-assessment in the first place, but then undertaking the actions required in order to achieve the progress reflected in the report. By reviewing the self-assessment improvement plan, and based on what Steve has just said about compliance against the standards, you will see the authority is now in a strong place to receive Corporate Peer Challenge. I welcome this challenge. It comes at a good time, as by October we will be only 5 months into our new administration, and it will provide us with further food for thought to be considered alongside our own initial findings and in time those of Doge. I particularly look forward to hearing about what our peers think of the local challenges and how we are tackling them head on. The preparation undertaken so far has been extensive, but the journey is far from over. There is still more to do in the run-up to the peer challenge and then afterwards tackling the areas for improvement and key recommendations. And with that, I move that Cabinet notes the report and its recommendations and approves the position statement. Can I invite Councillor Grimes, Deputy Leader, to second the report?
Thank you, Chair. Can I also thank Steve and his team for the work undertaken to prepare us for the Corporate Peer Challenge. I'm confident that peers will see the progress made by this administration in just a few short months, and the position statement portrays a sense of pride in what we've done and what we are going on to do. Like the Leader of the Council, I welcome this challenge. It's a positive opportunity to demonstrate the difference that this administration is already making to the people and businesses of County Durham. It's also the opportunity to benefit from the view of our peers that will surely help inform our direction of travel as an organisation and a fledgling administration. I defy anybody to visit the authority and not be impressed with the journey that we have just set ourselves upon. And with that, I second the report and move the recommendations.
Thank you. Are there any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? And does Cabinet agree the recommendations? Thank you. Item 11, East Durham Community Athletics Track, Grant of Option. Can I invite Paul Darby, Corporate Director of Resources, to present the report?
Thank you, Chair. This report sets out a proposal to rescind the decision by Cabinet on the 12th of February to offer East Durham Community Athletics Track, referenced as EDCAT throughout the report, an options agreement on some employment land at Net Park. EDCAT is a registered charity. The report references that EDCAT is a charitable arm of the Setchvale Harriers. I would like to correct that reference. That is not strictly legally correct, though the EDCAT website does reference that EDCAT had its origins in the Friends of the Setchvale Harriers, a charity established to support the successful Setchvale Harriers with fundraising and volunteers, and that's a direct quote from their website. Having consulted with the monitoring officer, this error in the report does not have a material impact on this decision that Cabinet are taking today. The report sets out the background to the previous decision and the material considerations that underpinned it. It is noted that the previous decision represented a disposal at less than best value and effectively sterilised 16.2 acres of employment land at Net Park, worth around £1 million. In line with the new administration's priorities in terms of a commitment to strategic employment sites such as Net Park, officers were tasked with revisiting the previous decision. This is possible because whilst heads of terms had been agreed, the execution of the option agreement had not been legally signed, and therefore the option agreement has not been exercised. So the Council is under no legal obligation to provide that options agreement in line with the previous Cabinet decision. The report sets out a number of options and the implications in terms of rescinding the previous decision, and the officer's recommendation is to offer EDCAT the option to explore a community asset transfer of the Shildon Athletics Track instead, providing they can work with and accommodate the current users and subject to an appropriate due diligence under the community asset transfer process. The report identifies that £345,000 of Section 106 funding had been awarded and allocated to EDCAT for the proposed facilities at Net Park. This funding cannot be transferred to the Shildon Track should EDCAT take up that offer set out in the report, as it must be spent in the Setchfield area. Details of the Section 106 funding sources and conditions attached to this are set out at paragraph 63 in the report, and alternative proposals need to be developed to invest these sums in other schemes in the Setchfield area in line with those legal Section 106 agreements. The main implications arising from this decision are reputational, as the Council has been working with EDCAT for a number of years prior to the decision by the previous Cabinet in February. That said, the decision will ensure that 16.2 acres of land that would otherwise be effectively sterilised will be available for future development and expansion of Net Park, providing the opportunity for more local employment and economic development in the future. If agreed, there will be a need to engage with representatives from EDCAT on the prospect of them taking on the Shildon Athletics Track. Should that ultimately be the case, then there would be around a £50,000 annual saving to the Council should that community asset transfer happen, which could be factored in the MTFP in future years. The recommendations, Chair, are set out at paragraph 12.
Thank you, Paul. We do have a question from Mr. Parsons. Is Mr. Parsons present? Mr. Parsons is clearly unable to attend today's meeting, so a written response to his question will be sent to him. We do have a question from Councillor Chris Lyons. Councillor Lyons, can you ask your question, please?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Paul. Over the last decade, Sedgefield has grown by nearly 30% as a result of a succession of major housing developments. Those developments have been accompanied by Section 106 funds that are supposed to mitigate their impact, but also contribute to community needs. These have included sums committed by the developers that have been ring-fenced for sports facilities and which are currently held by Durham County Council. After a long process between 2017 and 2019 that included extensive stakeholder and community consultation, the County Council published a list of sports schemes that it was minded to support through the allocation of Section 106 monies, along with an indication of how much it intended to award to each. Decisions were based on an assessment based on a combination of the level of local participation in the respective sport and the need and demand for additional fit-for-purpose facilities for those sports. The published list included provision for football and bowls in Sedgefield and Fishburn, and athletics, cricket, squash and rugby in Sedgefield. In 2021, the County Council reaffirmed its provisional allocations for each sport and invited the community groups that were leading on capital projects relating to them to apply for Section 106 funds for their projects. Groups that were leading projects for football in Fishburn and athletics, cricket and squash in Sedgefield indicated that they wanted to proceed with their schemes and have since worked to deliver them and access the funds. The football project in Fishburn was able to proceed quickly and has claimed its money. The community groups that are behind the athletics, cricket and squash projects in Sedgefield, all of which I actively support, and which are significant and complex, are still working hard to deliver them and complete the process to formally secure and claim their Section 106 funds, a total of around £500,000. Meanwhile, the level of participation in those sports and the need and demand for additional fit-for-purpose facilities has not diminished. In fact, it has increased. So what assurances will the DCC Cabinet give me that this money will be retained and spent in the town of Sedgefield on athletics, cricket and squash projects, honouring the commitments made by this council and supporting grassroots sport in the community? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Can I invite Councillor Quinn, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for the newly named Planning, Investment and Assets, to respond to the question.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to thank Councillor Chris Lyons for his question. We acknowledge the support the Council has been able to give to sporting clubs and the wider community projects through S106 funding in the Sedgefield Division in recent years. We look forward to continuing the work with those clubs who are able to demonstrate deliverable projects to help ensure the remaining S106 money is allocated in a timely manner. It is also worth noting, Chair, that Sport England and the UK Athletic do not support this project, and by going ahead with this decision we will free up £345,000 of S106 money for the division of Sedgefield. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Apologies for the feedback on this system. Is that another budget cut? Anyway, and finally, on this item, we have a question from Councillor Shuttleworth. Can Councillor Shuttleworth ask his question, please?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. The fact that the Reform Party has foolishly, in my view, decided to reduce the capital programme, which will probably affect revenue, income and not sustain long-term investment, actually makes it less likely that the land referred to at Net Park will be needed in the lifetime of the proposed lease. Also, scrapping the economy portfolio in Cabinet, which was responsibility for Net Park, sends a signal that this is not a priority and Durham County Council is closed for business. Obviously focusing on a new High Street portfolio which excludes other areas of the county.
Can I just interject, please? Can you rephrase the question, because clearly that information is not accurate?
I didn't interrupt you, just don't interrupt me, please. I haven't finished. Obviously focusing on the new High Street portfolio which excludes other areas of the county. The scheme in Sedgefield was going to benefit young people in Sedgefield. What has therefore changed since February that suddenly means that the land at Net Park will be needed for development?
Let's not forget who's chairing this meeting. And finally, can I invite Councillor Quinn Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Planning, Investment and Assets, to respond to this question.
Thank you, Chair. Again, slightly different question, but I got. Just like to address the Cabinet portfolio being scrapped again, and I'm going to quote, "Believe nothing you hear and only half of what you read. However, if that's from the Northern Echo, I would question the half." Can I thank Councillor Shuttleworth for his question? The simple answer to your question is that local elections in May is what has changed since February, and Reform are now running the council. As the report clearly sets out, the new administration has prioritised the retention of 16.240 acres of employment land at Net Park for the future employment, and do not believe that sterilising this land to fit a future development is a priority. Not only that, but we have sought to find different solutions to meet the needs of EDCA in terms of an athletics facility through proposed community asset transfer of Shildon Athletics Track to them, and hope they take up that offer. I would refer Councillor Shuttleworth to paragraphs 9 and 10 of the executive summary of the report, which articulates the rationale of this decision, and I quote, "The new administration prioritises including the commitment to strategic employment sites such as Net Park to attract investment and develop our economic strengths to create more and better jobs for County Durham residents, working with and influencing combined authority where appropriate, under the supercharging our economy ambition." Paragraph 10. This and the Government's recently published industrial strategy and the continuing progression of development of Net Park have influenced the decision to rescind the previous Cabinet decision and instead retain the land at Net Park as employment land for the future industrial use and expansion of Net Park. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. That doesn't sound foolish at all. That concludes the questions on this item. Can I now invite Councillor Quinn, once again, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Planning, Investment and Assets, to move the report.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank Paul and his team for preparing this report? As new administration, it is important that the action be taken by officers in line with our agreed strategic priorities. In this case, this has involved us revisiting a decision made by the previous administration earlier this year. The Cabinet will support impactful priorities, one of our agreed ambitions set out in the report Cabinet in July, and which will be weaved into the new corporate plan next month, is supercharging our economy, and as part of this, protecting, investing in and enhancing strategic employment sites, such as the site being Net Park. Excuse me, Chair. The granting of an option agreement to the East Durham Athletics Track was a political decision taken by the previous administration, and whilst the consequences of that were clearly set out in the report in Cabinet in February, it would result in the loss of approximately 16 acres of strategic employment land which has been safeguarded through planning policy for employment use, which has the potential for substantial economic and employment growth in the future. When you factor in that Sport England and the UK Athletics believe we have sufficient facilities in County Durham and do not support the EDCAT development at Net Park, the decision to rescind the offer and an option agreement on this land is a simple one. I appreciate the Council has been engaging with EDCAT over many years. However, the option agreement has not yet been actioned following the Cabinet decision in February. And the view of this Cabinet is the decision of the previous administration needs to be turned over. The report sets out a range of options available to us, with a recommended option offered to EDCAT an asset transfer of the existing Shildon Sunnydale Athletics Track and Stadium instead. This would mean that external funding could be sought, as it is already strategically recognised site by Sport England and UK Athletics, and also has track mark status. The Council invested £500,000 in this facility in 2023, which included a new track surface and athletics equipment, and is ready to go. EDCAT would not have to find funds to build it, as would be the case at Net Park. This is an opportunity for EDCAT to take an existing strategic site and attract funding to improve facilities, while safeguarding the Net Park site for economic and employment growth, a win for both parties. As members will see, a condition of any such asset transfer would be the production of a robust business plan to demonstrate that EDCAT could successfully manage and operate the facility, but also that they could accommodate the existing users of the track. One of the consequences of this decision is that the Section 106 funding that had been allocated to EDCAT would need to be reallocated to other projects in Sedgefield. And work will now be undertaken to identify suitable and other investments in line with the conditions attached to that funding. With that, Chair, I move the recommendations set out in paragraph 12 of this report.
Thank you. Can I ask Councillor Allison, Cabinet Portfolio Holder for Leisure, Tourism and High Street, to second the report?
Thank you, Chair. Can I also thank Paul and his team for preparing this report? It's important that we recognise and support the opportunities to supercharge our economy and deliver growth and inward investment. Net Park is the region's only dedicated science park, currently home to 40 companies employing over 1,000 people in well-paid jobs. It's a designated growth site through the creation of a new investment zone for the region, aligned to the £4.2 billion North East Devolution deal. As a result, it's well placed to benefit from future investment linked to the government's recently published industrial strategy. It therefore does not make sense to me to forego 16 acres of prime employment land that could shunt its future expansion and growth. The opportunity for EDCAT to take over the running of the existing Shildon Sunnydale Athletic Stadium under a community asset transfer would put an established athletics group at the heart of this facility and provide EDCAT with the facilities they seek, and I do hope they give this offer very serious consideration. Rescinding the previous decision also of course releases the £345,000 of Section 106 agreement funding to be awarded to other qualifying projects in the Sedgefield constituency area. And with that, Chair, I formally second the recommendations as set out at paragraph 12 of this report. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other Cabinet members wishing to speak? And does Cabinet agree the recommendations? Thank you. Item 12, exclusion of the public. Please can I have a mover and seconder for a resolution to exclude the press and public?
I'll move that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Jenner.
I'll second that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lyons. Does Cabinet agree the resolution? That concludes the public business for this part of the meeting. I would like to thank everyone for taking part and to those members of the public and media who have watched this meeting.